What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel for another episode of the Ask Me Anything series. It's been about a month since the last episode, so I thought now would be a good time to get one out for you guys before the season starts. This will probably be the last one of the off season. As always, I want to give a huge thank you to every single one of you who took the time to leave a question on the post. Even the questions that don't get featured in the video, just know I read every single one. If this is your first time checking out the channel and you want NHL content just like this all year round, hit that subscribe button. We're getting super close to 75,000. And with all that being said, let's go ahead and kick this episode off with the first question from Datvin's Cat, who says, what are your expectations for Lucas Raymond and Moritz Seider this upcoming season? I believe that Seider will take a step forward this season because of a consistent defensive partner. So both Seider and Raymond are coming off of a season in which I think it's safe to say each of them had their own variation of a sophomore slump. In the case of Moritz Seider, he started off the season very slow. That deep pairing with himself and Ben Sherratt, it just didn't work. It was a complete disaster. Their play styles clashed, but once Seider was paired with Jake Wallman, he never looked back. That pairing was fantastic together, and I'm very excited to see what those two guys can do together on the Red Wings top pairing for an entire season. I have really high expectations for Moritz Seider now heading into his third NHL season. This is a player that I feel like has the potential to be a Norris Trophy candidate. Now, I'm not saying that he's going to do that this season, but I think we're going to see him take steps and strides towards becoming that player, maybe have a 55 to 60 point season, which I think he's more than capable of. I mean, he put up 50 points as a rookie, and then of course give the Red Wings the consistent defensive play that we've become accustomed to seeing from him up until this point in his career. And when it comes to Lucas Raymond, I think it's very important for the Red Wings that we see Lucas Raymond take a big step this season if they want to be a legit playoff contender. If you've watched any of the videos I've made on the Red Wings over the past couple of months, then you've probably heard me say the Red Wings' biggest weakness is top-end forward talent. And this offseason, Steve Yzerman did go out and address that need with Alex DeBrincat, but still just having Larkin and DeBrincat as your only top-end forwards, I don't think that's enough. If Lucas Raymond can break out and have maybe a 30-goal, 65 to 70 point season, that would really go a long way in terms of helping the Red Wings' playoff hopes. And I believe Raymond is capable of giving the Red Wings that kind of production. This is a guy who had a 23-goal, 57-point season as a rookie. Now heading into his third season, he's going to be playing on what is likely going to be the most talented line he's played on in the NHL up until this point in his career. So those are kind of where my expectations are at for both Seider and Raymond heading into their third seasons. This next question comes from Xavier Morgan Gillard, who says, if you had to pick one team, who would you say will be this year's version of last year's Devils, who had an absolutely insane acceleration of their rebuild and now find themselves as an elite Eastern team? Really appreciate the support as well. This is a really good question. I'm not sure if we're gonna see a team have that kind of jump. I mean, the Devils went from a .384 win percentage in 2021-22 to a .683 this past season, which is just insane. One team that I think we will see a pretty sizable point increase from season to season is the Columbus Blue Jackets. Obviously, this past season, they were the second worst team in the NHL points-wise, 59 points in 82 games. Based on all the moves they've made this offseason, bringing in the likes of Damon Severson, Ivan Provorov, drafting Adam Fantilli, who's expected to play in the top 6 right away. Also factor in the team getting healthy. They were just riddled with injuries to key players this past season. I could see a scenario where the Blue Jackets go from 59 points to having an 80 to 85 point season, which would obviously be a massive improvement. Now, that being said, 80 to 85 points, that doesn't even get you into the playoffs, but I really just can't see a team that finished towards the basement of the league this past season have a jump like the New Jersey Devils did and become a contender in just 1 year. Moving along now to the next question. This one comes from NeoXD, who says, despite being very cap tight, Vegas managed to win the cup last year. Do you think the moves they made this offseason will keep them in cup contention with the first or second seed, or do you see them falling back a bit into third or even fourth? Also, really appreciate the support. For the most part, Vegas is going to be bringing back the same team that just won the Stanley Cup. Sure, they had to trade Riley Smith due to cap reasons. They sent him to Pittsburgh for, I believe it was a third-round draft pick, but that opened up the cap space for them to be able to re-sign Ivan Barbashev, who was obviously massive for them in the playoffs. But other than Riley Smith, Vegas really didn't lose any key pieces. As long as they can get goaltending similar to what they got this past season from Aiden Hill and Logan Thompson, I'm fully expecting Vegas to be one of the better teams in the Western Conference again, and once again be a Stanley Cup contender. This next question comes from Landon, who says, with Trevor Zegras still without a contract, what kind of contract should we expect to see once signed? Short term, long term, and what would the cap hit be? Love the videos and interested to see what you think about this one. Really appreciate the kind words. So obviously the Ducks are one of the most cap flexible teams in the league. It's not like they're in a situation where they can only give Zegras, a certain amount. amount. Ideally, the Ducks would probably want to get Zegras locked up to an 8-year deal. If they came to terms on an 8-year deal this offseason, my guess on the cap it would be maybe somewhere between 8 and 8.5 million. However, I feel like Zegras and his agent are probably more in the market for a short-term bridge deal, because while yes, Zegras has been really good for Anaheim throughout his first 2 NHL seasons, I think we all know that he's just scratching the surface. I think Zegras is a guy that can be, a perennial 90-plus point scorer. So if Zegras were to sign, say for an example, a 2-year bridge deal, and in the final year of that contract he has a 90-95 point season, then he's probably looking at an extension somewhere in the range of, maybe around 10 mil per season in terms of a cap hit. This next question comes from Karen Ratton, who says, do you think Caufield can crack 40-plus goals this year? Without a doubt, yes. The biggest thing is just he needs to stay healthy. This past season in 46 games, Caufield scored 26 goals, which is, I believe, over a 45-goal pace across an 82-game season. Cole Caufield is going to be one of the best goal scorers in the league for a very long time, so honestly, if he stays healthy, I'd be more surprised if he scores less than 40 goals than if he scores 40-plus. The next question we have comes from Tori, who says, what is your projected split at goalie for the Wings? Any chance Husso plays 60? I really hope he doesn't. Ville Husso started his first season with the Red Wings extremely hot, looked fantastic, but now when you look back at his numbers as a whole on the year, they're terrible. For the greater part of the second half of the season, Ville Husso just looked completely burnt out. Alex Nedeljkovic for the most of the year was a non-option. Magnus Hellberg came up and got some starts, but for the most part, it was Ville Husso carrying the load, getting the majority of starts. This season, ideally, I'd hope for Ville Husso to start maybe around 45 games. I think Steve Yzerman made it a point this offseason to go out and sign not just one viable NHL backup, but 2 in James Reimer and Alex Lyon. So hopefully both of those guys can give the Red Wings some quality starts and help take some of the load off Ville Husso, because I feel like it was very clear that he was overworked this past season. Moving along now, this next question comes from Connor McDrysaddle, who says, like Huberdeau last year, obviously probably won't be as big, but who do you think will be a big fall-off player this year? Also, really appreciate the kind words. Looking at your name and your profile picture, you may not like this answer, but I'm going to go with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. Actually just had 104 points in 82 games, 37 of which of those points were goals. His previous career high was 69 points. I think we can all agree that Ryan Nugent-Hopkins probably isn't a guy that's going to be, a perennial 100-point player. He had a career high this past season in shooting percentage at almost 20%, a career high in power play goals by almost double his previous career high in power play goals. I think it's safe to assume we're going to see a drop in production from Ryan Nugent-Hopkins this season. I wouldn't be surprised maybe if he has around 70 to 75 points, which obviously is still a very productive player, but that would be almost a 30-point drop off from season to season. So I think he'd be a pretty good candidate for, a big point drop off. The next question we have comes from Andrew Alonzo, who says, who is the most likely to hit 100 points for the first time this season? Tage Thompson, Jack Hughes, Braden Point, or Tim Stutzla? And also, really appreciate the kind words. Glad you liked the videos. Of the 4 players you listed, my number 1 would definitely be Jack Hughes. I just think he's the highest ceiling player of these 4. The dude is an absolute game breaker. Just had an incredible season, 43 goals, 99 points in 78 games. Jack Hughes is a guy that I think is going to be, a perennial 100-plus point player for a very long time. With the way scoring is going in the NHL, I don't think it would be a huge shock to anybody if all 4 of these guys cracked the 100-point mark this season, but if I had to just pick one, I would go with Hughes. This next question comes from NHL NS8BF, who says, any advice for those looking to attend their first ever NHL game? You know what, actually, I don't have any advice because I myself have never been to an NHL game. Not a regular season game, not a playoff game, not even a preseason game. I live in Nova Scotia, so I'd have to actually plan a trip to go somewhere that has an NHL team, and for me, I want my first NHL game to be a Red Wings game in Detroit. I've really just been waiting for the Red Wings to fully come out of this rebuild. Imagine making the trip to Detroit, going to your first NHL game, and they get the doors blown off them. I would be devastated. Now, of course, any team in the league has a chance of getting blown out on any given night, but I do feel like the longer I wait, the better and better the Red Wings get. The chances of them having a game like that the one time I'm in attendance, I feel like are a little bit lower at least. So yeah, I don't really have any advice on attending an NHL game. I'm kind of in the same boat you are, but I'm sure there's a lot of people watching this video that have been to an NHL game, so leave any advice that you have for us down below in the comments. Moving along now, this next question comes from Brandon TO10, who says, do you think Seattle has a good chance of jumping Vegas, Edmonton, or LA? If so, who? And also, really appreciate the support. I'm gonna go with no on this one. I actually think we might see Seattle regress a little bit. That's not to say they're gonna go back to being a basement team. I still think this is a legit playoff contender, they had a lot of guys that had career years that I think we may see a little bit of regression from. And just looking at that roster, I don't think that's a team that I believe is a perennial 100-point team. Again, still think they're going to be playoff contenders for sure, but I can't see them jumping over any one of Vegas, Edmonton, or LA, definitely. Next up, this question comes from Tyler the Miler, who says, if you were a GM, would you spend 10 plus mil AAV on a pure elite goalie or run a goalie tandem for cheap and use that cap space to spend elsewhere? I ask because it seems like some teams are really going the route of tandem goalies and playing whoever is hot. To be honest, I don't think there's a single goaltender in the league that I would give a 10 plus mil AAV to. Goaltending is just so unpredictable in the NHL. Obviously, when it comes to, the absolute best of the best, the Vasilevskis, the Sorokins, the Shesterkins, you usually know what you're going to get from those guys, and they're always going to give you a chance to win. But say if you do have a goaltender like that and you are paying them 10 plus mil and they get injured, then what? You probably don't have a lot of cap space to spend on a solid backup. You probably have, one of the lower end backups in the league. With the way the league is and the game is played today in 2023, I honestly would prefer the tandem option. Now, of course, anybody would love to have, a Vasilevsky, Shesterkin, Saros, Sorokin on their team, but I just think paying any goaltender 10 mil plus is a recipe for disaster, especially, as they get into their 30s. The next question we have comes from Endorsed Toast, who says, I've been seeing this debate a lot over the past few weeks. Who would you rather have, Elias Pettersson or Jason Robertson? And I'm assuming this question is like, if you're starting a franchise, which one of these players at their age, contract would you take to have for the future? And honestly, I think I'll go with Elias Pettersson, which may not be the popular answer, but I'm a big believer in building your team down the middle, and I think a franchise centerman is more important than, a franchise winger. Sure, Jason Robertson outscored Elias Pettersson this past season, but Pettersson still quietly had a 102-point season. He's also a fantastic two-way centerman. He's going to be one of the best centermen in the league for a long time, so give me Pettersson, with no disrespect to Jason Robertson. Next up, this question comes from Belgit Leon, so hopefully I said your name properly, but the question is, if Connor Bedard is not the next captain of the Chicago Blackhawks, who on the active roster should/could be the captain till he's ready, or do they leave it vacant for him till then? And also, really appreciate the support, glad you like the videos. If I had to guess, I think they're going to go with leaving it vacant until Connor Bedard is ready. I mean, this guy's going to be captain of the Blackhawks one day. Is that going to be in the next 2 years? Is that going to be, maybe 5-6 years down the line? I think in all likelihood, it's probably going to be in the next 2 years or so, and he'll be, named a very young captain, similar to like McDavid, Crosby, Landeskog. The only other guy on the roster that I could see them maybe giving the C to that would make the slightest bit of sense is Seth Jones, but I'm definitely going to go with them leaving it vacant until Bedard's ready. This next question comes from Brody Warden, who says, predictions on Nylander's next contract. This has obviously been a very big topic of discussion amongst, the Leafs fan base throughout the offseason so far. It's being reported that William Nylander wants, 10 mil plus. I just don't think it makes any sense for the Leafs to give him that. It's just not viable to be paying 4 different forwards on your team at 10 mil plus. That's insane. Now, Nylander did recently say on the 32 Thoughts podcast hosted by Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick that he loves Toronto. He wants to be in Toronto, and he doesn't see what the big fuss is about because, his contract isn't up until next summer. But Brad Treliving really got to play this right. If he doesn't get the sense that Nylander is going to re-sign, if his number won't come down, if he's dead set on getting an AAV of 10 mil plus, I think you have to explore the option of trading William Nylander, because that's a player you could get a massive haul for, and losing a guy like that for nothing would just be detrimental to the franchise. But now, answering the question that you actually asked, what is my prediction on what his next contract will look like? I'm going to say 8 years, 9 mil per season. And now for the final question of this episode, this one comes from Bubbles X31 Hockey, who says, who is a prospect that was a bust but you really wish worked out? This is an interesting question. As a Red Wings fan, the first one that immediately pops into my mind is, of course, Filip Zadina. Now, Zadina is still only 22 or 23 years old, so can you really call a player that young a bust? I think you can in this case. I feel like it is safe to say Filip Zadina is never going to live up to, being the 6th overall draft pick from 2018. He's never going to become the player that he was expected to be when the Red Wings selected him. But I'll also give you guys a non-Red Wings one, Jonathan Drouin, the 3rd overall draft pick from 2013 by the Lightning. He's another guy that, can you really call him a bust? Because he's still in the league. He's had a couple of 50-point seasons, but I think you can call him a bust because, man, this guy coming into the draft, watching him in junior at the Halifax Mooses, if you've never seen Jonathan Drouin QMJHL highlights, go watch them. This guy was McDavid-like in junior. I really thought Drouin was going to be the kind of guy that would push, 90 to 100 points in a season. I really did. He's definitely not somebody that I thought ever would be, at 28 years old, signing a 1-year league min deal, which is what he signed with the Avalanche. I am really excited that he is reunited with McKinnon. It's looking like Colorado's going to try him on McKinnon's wing. I hope that they can, rekindle the magic that they had together on the Mooseheads, because I like Duran a lot. I think he's a very talented, skilled player, just hasn't been able to put it all together just yet. So that is going to wrap up this episode of the Ask Me Anything series. Again, like I said at the beginning of the video, huge thank you to every single one of you who took the time to come up with a question and leave it on the post. You guys make these interactive videos so much fun for me to do. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to leave it a like. That is the best way to show your support. And most importantly, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want NHL content just like this all year round, hit that subscribe button, and I'll talk to you all soon.